There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is session two of day two of our PTG. Feels so long already. I hope you're enjoying the rest of the sessions that you've been in. I know you definitely like this one. Thanks for joining in again. And I know a bulk of the folks here, it's already past your work time. So thank you so much for making the time to join us. Um, I was hoping this would work for somebody's time zone when I saw for the time zones, but here we are. And so we begin this afternoon, evening with Douglas and Carlos. They're going to be talking about security services for and modifying them for in-use share networks. And so I can pass the control over to you guys. I mean, you already have it. You can, if you would like to share your screens, you can go ahead as well. I turned that on.
Okay, I can start it. I was starting to talk about the update of secure service for news share networks. So this topic has another issue that is to add and delete security service to news share networks. So, but at this moment, we are focused on update secure service. Then later we can talk about it. Associate or dissociate security service to use share network. A bit of background for the people that doesn't are too familiar with Manila security service. They hold configurations for current to authenticate to authorize user access for shares using external authentication servers like Microsoft Active Directory, for example. And currently, Manila supports three different security services. That is LDAP, Kerberos, and Microsoft Active Directory. And these security services, they don't do anything by themselves in Manila. They must be associated with a shared network in order to provide this configuration to the backend. So during setup of a shared server, when working on GHSS through mode, Manila will provide this security service information to the backend together with the network allocation information. So at this point, drivers, when setting up share servers, can properly also configure directory service and other security service info together with their servers. So today from Manila API, users can add, delete, show, and update security servers. And however, after one of these security servers start being used or being active, which means that we have at least one shared server associated with the security service that has this security service associated. At this point, Manila blocks any update or delete operation since the security service is already in use. So the thing that we are trying to propose here is to improve this API and also allow a user to update one of the or other security service parameters as many as he needed. And this update will reflect on the all associated shared servers that are already setting up on the backend. So the problem here is basic that. So a simple use case is an admin and a user needs to update the password for administrator user that's already configured on his share server. So if this password changes over the time, he won't be able to do this through Manila. So one idea would be if this password changes and we still have many share servers set up on the backend. The idea is that the security service update will also trigger an update on all associated share servers. So this first part is that we are planning to provide this feature to Manila. And we started proposing a spec. So we have the link for a spec on the Etherpad. And so I started describing this problem and the use cases, telling uh, the kind of use case that a user might face when trying to update a security service. And we are proposing some changes to the code. So we are going through these changes, and we can discuss if anybody see any issue with these changes, if something is missing, and provide any feedback that you folks want. So I'm going to start talk about the change on the API. So today, the API blocks if you want to update security service parameters, and this security server has already some share servers associated to it. So we are going to change that behavior, but together with that, we are planning to add in the share server module a new capability that will tell us if these share servers support security service update, because at least the driver associated need to implement this kind of feature. Okay, about this new share server capability. So the idea is that not all drivers will support this operation. So in order to update the security service, all associated share servers must support security service update. So this capability on the share server model will help us to identify earlier on the API if this update operation can continue, if it will succeed, has a chance to succeed when we reach the drivers. So this new capability brings us these easily identify if this operation will end in a happy way.
So what happens for a user who attempts this when the backend does not support it?
So if the backend does not support it, the idea is that all share servers have this capability attached to the share server model. So in the API, we can identify that at least one cannot update this image. So we are going to deny to the user the update operation.
Do they get a synchronous error from the API, or do they get an error message later from a failure, or what? I'm just spelling out the alternatives here.
Yeah, we can give a synchronous, I believe that we can give a synchronous error, since we can quickly check on the database if all share servers will support this operation. So
yeah,
this might be easily to be
so
handled
it's
on
not
the
just
API.
that the capability goes to the scheduler and then it fails or something. It's that you can detect it from the API and give a synchronous error right then.
Yeah, using this new share server capability. So on drawback would be what will happen with share servers when an admin updates the Manila release, and he already have a lot of share servers already deployed. So the idea here is that we will initialize these capabilities as with a new value, and later on the driver boot, we can check if any of these shared servers that is set to none
Check, check.
can support or not.
Hold on, I wanted to interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
Upgrade's going to be really interesting for this one, but I still had API questions. So I understand the you had the I mean you're going to check via look up for a given security service all the provisioned share servers, look at their model and figure out with this capability bit that you have that says this supports a security service update or not. And if any of them doesn't support it, we will respond right off the API saying it's not supported for this given security service. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so the other aspect is how do you track the update itself? There is no security service, you know, status or something like that. Is there at this point, or are you thinking of that?
So okay, so uh, we plan to trigger these update for all share servers. So the idea was to have this new state at share server. So all share servers are being updated to have these new information. So at least from the security server side, uh, it it has been updated, but we are still waiting for all share servers to be modified at the backend level. That can take some time. So after updating the security service, one of the share servers might fail, and this share server will go to an error state, while others you have the full up to date. So at the point of security service, I think that will be updated, but the admin must be aware of that. Some share server is reporting an error and might be a need to manually fix it.
Yeah, so that's going to be a little problematic for this thing. So security services are tenant driven. So tenants have the ability to add, remove, change security services. I'm assuming this update is going to be available to tenants, correct? Because they are the ones that
Yeah,
control that authentication domain. So in case a password changes, for instance, they're the ones that will have to update it rather than pass the password on to a administrator or something like that.
yeah,
So the but they have no knowledge of these share servers themselves. So that's what I'm trying to get at when you're saying, like, I could have X number of share servers and maybe some of them failed, but how would I know when I'm updating a security service? Or maybe nothing fails, everything. I mean, the best case scenario is this update is ongoing. Can I use authentication yet? That would
yeah,
be
yeah,
my first concern.
yeah. It's a good point. At least um, they need to know that it's not ready yet. Yeah, right. Yeah. That's a interesting concern to do that. So looking at this point, at least the security server must have a modifying state that will hold any user operation until there, maybe. But this is still don't fix the problem that share server may fail, and there is no way of giving this info to users, since they don't have this uh, level of information of share servers.
Yeah, kind of that's one concern. Yeah, we could actually have a security service state or something. I just looked up. There is no such thing right now.
Yeah,
A security service is just created, and that's it. Like we don't really have a status column for any asynchronous operations with respect to security services. So maybe that's one improvement where you can give some visibility to the end user, and for as long as that security service update is happening, you can't really use that security service. But
Yeah,
at the same time, my concern is also to stop using any other operations with respect to share servers that are getting modified, right? Because I could go, in theory, say provide access to this new user. Let's say I have a share server that's associated with Active Directory, and I'll say provide access to user X. But the share server certainly can't communicate to the Active Directory because the password is incorrect, and the user has actually tried to update the password but have not yet gotten there. So that introduces this space of not having feedback, because right now the way it works is you first set up your security services and then you create your shares. So you have this feedback. So if your share has failed to create for some reason, you're gonna see the share is in error, and your access rules not even going to work because the security service did not is not valid to begin with.
yeah. So the point of view of if we have a state that share server is being updated, and we also have the share server status helping us to block any operation at that level. So at least we can find a way of letting user know that that share server, we can't say share server, but that at least a security service is being updated on that server, and he must hold on until the updates finish, something like that. At least for giving new access for shares that are at that share server.
Exactly, and I think this would make sense even at a level earlier, right? Your share networks. Um, if you can prevent provisioning or adding access rules or modifying anything with respect to, I mean, because conceivably we don't know what exactly is the association between, and we don't define it. What exactly is the association between the security service and the share server? From what I recall, storage systems like NetApp, every time you create a share, they go ahead and create some sort of an association on the back end, set metadata by contacting the security service. And this could be true even of Kerberos. So it may not be just for authentication sake, but you're also using this when you're creating and deleting shares. And this could be for any other operations as well at that point. So I mean, updating a security service feels like it needs to be some sort of a maintenance um, thing. It shouldn't happen all the time, but when it happens, everything else needs to be blocked. Otherwise, you might run into the risk of errors.
Yeah. Yeah. At this point, we are aligned, and I was thinking about that. So the idea to set also our servers to a modifying state or a specific state that says that we are updating security service will help us block any operation that share server, and uh, helping us to fail earlier on the API in order to give this info to the users. So at least at my point of view, we only have the problem with a failing share server that needs to be fixed by an admin at this point. So this update operation might fail, and we might say users that the security service is in another state since one of the share service failed. And by this, my blocking any other operation related to this security service, not only to that share server. So this is one of the issues that we still need to investigate.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, it could also apply to a whole class of things, right? I mean, I would imagine security services are one aspect, but of course you might want to toggle something in your share network, and this could be maybe I want to change the MTU of my share network or the gateway of my share network or something like that. It would be as disruptive as that, even for that use case.
Yeah. Yeah. This is not one of the issues that we are facing right now, but at least for share networks, um, even though we don't have this improvement, we are not planning to provide it. But for sure, this will open uh, uh, the idea for new improvements also in share networks. Uh, okay, so still regarding the changes, so we talk about it, the state of the share server, and I was talking earlier about this share server capability. So on that part, we are planning to use the driver initialization to get all share servers that does not have these capabilities set to true or false, and update this info on the database. And once that this info was updated on the database, we do not plan to change it again. So it might be set to true or false forever. Admin must changes in other ways if it needed. So by doing this, we can guarantee that the deployed share servers can have this capability set to true or false depending on the driver that supports the operation or not. And
I didn't quite catch that. How are you planning on doing this update or figuring out what the capability is? Will that be a database migration, or will that be something on first attempt sort of a thing?
so no, the idea, okay, first thing, the database migration, we are going to insert the capability, and this will set to a unknown value at this point. So after the first driver initialization, the idea is to get all share servers and see if they have this empty value. We are going to set to true or false once. So the idea is to check with the driver it supports the functionality, the feature, and provide this update to the database once for to true or false. So the idea of update this once is to not having this loop iteration on all share servers and update database every time that the driver initializes. But the idea is to have these share servers with the correct capability set at the first run of this release. I don't know if this answered your question.
It partially did. I'm trying to recall what is the other time we actually do something like this. We've thought about doing something like this for capabilities that we now expose, but previously used to assume, right? For example, an optional capability like share shrinking. Um, Not all drivers supported it, and then we made that optional. And then, I mean, we called it out as optional, but even today, when somebody goes to shrink a share, we actually have no synchronous response. It actually gets to the driver, and I mean, we just have a bug fix that'll set it back to available state because the driver doesn't support it, and then it sends them a user message saying this backend, your share driver does not support shrinking this share. So upfront, there is no feedback from the API because of that behavior. So what we were thinking with that was very similar. Try and set this to a unknown value, using a database migration and allow a first operation to occur, and then at that point whether you can do it or not, and you set it to the right thing and use the asynchronous user messages feature to communicate back to the end user. Not really the most intuitive, desirable way, but it is a way. Um, w- w- wouldn't it also make sense to just default everything that we currently have to non-updatable and allow the administrator to actually go in and modify existing share servers? Is that an option at all? I mean, have you considered that?
It's an option, but yeah, how do you think that the admin will do that by simply updating the database or providing an interface to do that?
I didn't catch the last bit.
Uh, 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 I want
We
that. I want to know if the how admin should update this info, if it should change directly on the database, uh, if we follow this your idea, or if we should provide an interface to update this kind of capability for every share server. So I don't know how the admin could hold this modification.
Hey, yes. Were you saying that you're not clear how the administrator would know how to update it?
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
so uh, yeah, I mean, short of asking them to mess around with the database, right? We could provide I mean, two things: either an admin API to manipulate the resource, but this is probably overkill for this. I mean, typically what we've done for day two operations such as this is we've allowed a Manila manage subcommand where you can go in and just manipulate a bunch of things that you have. For example, like replacing your host. That's a typical day two operation because somebody changed
Yeah,
configuration and we want to reload. We have a Manila manage command to do that. So you could add a simple interface into that, so people can toggle this bit on shared servers. That's one option.
yeah, it's an interesting option. Yeah, yeah, it could work. Sure. I don't know. I think that both ideas will work. But you were raising some issues with the proposal that I was telling about updating on the driver initialization. So we might take this uh, in consideration when proposing this change. This part is not in the spec yet, so I'm planning to update that. I will consider an external command to update these that for sure might work also. Um, Carlos was about to say something. I interrupted him.
So I was just going to say something that Gautam has already said, which is to maybe provide a new method in the API which would allow the administrator to update this field in the database. But it sounds like overkill, as you said. And I think the Manila Manage option would be great for this. So I mean, I agree with this approach for this.
So thanks.
Yeah, I mean, the reasoning is it's not the end of the world for existing resources, right? It's better to err on the side of caution and say these are not updatable, and let the administrator make the call based on what the backends support it, because they know. I mean, you're probably going to advertise this as a scheduler feature, etc. So they know that this feature is available for a given backend, and share servers on that backend need to be updated. So even if the utility is as simple as update all share servers for a given backend string, um, to set this capability to X, that that would solve your problem. And they would have to do this once their deployment is upgraded to the latest release.
Yeah, right. So I'll continue on the backend part. So the idea is also to provide a backend capability to identify backends that support this operation of security service update, and also provide the interface for share servers to have this security update implemented. So from the share server, from the driver side, new interfaces are going to be proposed, and also we are planning to add this new capability so we can identify these different different backends that support this or not, at least at scheduler level. So I have here some questions that gotten was made on our Etherpad. So we created a new Etherpad to start discussing the things that what we want to implement. So the Etherpad is also on the PTG Etherpad. So there we raised some questions regarding the shares that are being affected by this change. So what will happen if the share server update fails? So now we are going back to the questions that we are facing, the problems we are facing in the beginning. So at this point, we don't have a good solution for that. Our users will know what is happening in the backend since one share server fail on a security service update. So something that we need to address on our spec. And regarding the shares that will be affected, my thought is that this is something that user wants to update. It's want to update on a password, for example, and this might be already affecting new shares to be deployed, shared access to be configured on that share server. So this might be failing for some reason, and they need to update this info. So at least at my point of view, shared access might not be affected negatively by this update. Only if the user provide a misconfigured update with wrong parameters and so on. Do you have any thoughts on that, Gautam?
Well, I kind of think, yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, there's going to be no negative update, but it's hard to think on those lines given that this is completely widely open to backends to implement, right? So I mean, not having the kind of visibility to what their implementations specifically are going to be for these different security services. I want to say, you know, if there is some sort of a way to validate that beforehand, that would probably be what tenants would want to do. I mean, it could be as simple as, hey, can I try run this security service update or something without breaking everything. It might be too ideal to ask for something like that, but it would be. The reason I'm asking is what can break, what kind of updates can break everything. Is there any way to know beforehand?
It's like calling on a verification before actually
Yeah, or
calling
or
the new
or even
update.
saying, here's let me think, because we do this kind of validation for migrations.
Yeah,
So if we can do something, we go ahead and do it. But if we can't do something, we fail, and we the message is you have to force this, because we're not going to proceed given these validation errors. And it might be possible that it might be possible that they want to force an update, and they're okay with the part of their share servers not being not never recovering from this. So it's a maintenance day two sort of concern more than
yeah,
this thing. But that's what this API is all about too, right? We don't expect this to be used a lot.
yeah. You're right. Okay, it might be possible to do some validation within the driver. I need to think about it, how this is going to work on that upside, for example, how we are going to validate this kind of change. But at least one kind of validation we can do for sure. Uh, and for sure, this will be very helpful in order to not break everything and due to a mistake from user.
And I'm assuming that the API service is going to just send an N, uh, you know, RPC calls at one to all the shared servers it identifies, right? This
Yeah,
is not going to go through the scheduler. It's just going to go directly to the shared manager service from the API.
yeah, yeah. It is going to do. We are going directly to the share API that we distribute to every share service that will handle that share server, and this is going to be a distributed configuration.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is the expected implementation. Yes. Any other open points? Let me see if I forgot something on that part. We are almost done with our timing for this topic. And there is another part that we were thinking about it. Also add and remove security servers from share network. We can move this discussion to another day because we are not planning to mix both on the same spec at least. I'm
Okay.
not sure if we should do this.
No, that makes
I don't know.
sense. I think to so basically this is I mean just to clarify, this is about modifying an existing share network by adding more security services. So basically there are some share networks that have already got shares within them. You want to modify those shares by creating a new authentication domain.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right. Yeah,
So
the idea is to these share networks are already in use, and we want to associate a new security service. The main use case is to add a new security service. Start deleting that, but thinking on associating a new security service, the idea is to apply this configuration to the already deployed share servers within that share network.
makes sense. Yeah, we can move this, and maybe we can discuss in between ourselves. But I think ideally we'd probably move this out to Friday. Um, if we have some time. Otherwise, we
Yeah,
can always get another slot and discuss this.
sure. Or we can. I'm not sure if we're going to propose a spec for Victoria regarding this one, and we might forward these to the spec discussion or to
Yeah,
another 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 meeting.
absolutely. Okay. Cool. Any
So
concerns, the rest of you?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. I think we're all waiting on a break. So let's take that break.
yeah,
We are reconvening here in, let's take a full 10 minutes and come back here. When I see folks back here, we can get started on the next topic, which is going to be creating shares on 2 or more subnets. Again, Douglas. So we'll give him a voice break as well.
okay.
All right.
All right. See you folks in 10
See ya.
minutes. Bye-bye. I'm recording. All right, welcome back. Here's a session on creating shares with 2 or more subnets, and it's going to be led by Douglas again, if he doesn't have way too much on his plate already. So, off over to you, Douglas.
Okay, I we started talking about this feature that we have some interest on implementing also, and this is something that was proposed some time ago by Rodrigo, and the idea is to have a share servers with multiple subnets, multiple IP address. This means that it's not only an IPv6 or an IPv4. Can be multiple IPv4s or IPv6. Uh, yeah, the idea here is basically is to extend what was merged into string release. So in string release, share networks were improved with. They now can span to multiple subnets. So in string, we can associate multiple subnets to a single share network, and we can associate these subnets to an availability zone or to a default or fallback availability zone. So with this improvement, uh, we can think about that a second step would be to have more subnets associated to the same availability zone, for an example. So the idea here is that if we plan to improve share network subnets by adding more than one subnet per AZ or more than one default subnet, the idea is that this configuration could be also applied to share servers that support this. So this is one of the limitations that we have right now. We can think about some different use cases that might be usable to have more than one subnet configured. So one of them is to have both IPv4 and IPv6 configured on the same share server. Second one would be if we are planning to moving the share servers from a subnet to a different one. It's some kind of network migration. So um, the user can add a subnet that is the destination of the migration, and later move one by one all the shares, all the hosts to that new subnet, and later remove uh, the old subnet. And also, a use case could be have different departments and each one on different subnets, and then need to access the same share on the share servers. So on this scenario, would be good to have more than one subnet configured on the same share server, and in order to reach the same shares. So this is something that I said before, started by Rodrigo proposing a spec that was not approved or merged. On his suggestions, the idea is that we have multiple subnets per AZ on a single share network. So by doing this, we need some improvements in order to have this working properly. So let me start with the from the share server part. So this is some configuration that will affect the share servers. So the idea behind of setting up a share server with multiple subnets will be the drivers that implement this interface will be able to provide a new interface implement a new interface in order to configure share server to multiple interface, different from the current setup that we have. So these drivers.
Hold on, you're saying that you're actually approaching this with the thing that there are going to be drivers that may not support multiple tenant networks, but there is already the I mean an admin network concept in Manila. So technically, drivers already support two networks, right? We didn't make this distinction for shared drivers when we added that admin network capability.
Okay, so at this point, I'm not sure if drivers are treating or at least expecting to receive to subnets that are not admin networks, right? I think that this issue came in different models or not.
I agree. I actually don't know that myself. I mean, the issue with admin networks was if they were there, that is what we would use for share migration. If they were not there, we would actually try to connect to the tenant network itself. That was the mechanism, and I don't remember if there was anything about maybe there is code in there that says if the share driver does not implement a particular method, then we're not going to support admin networks at all. So this would fall in that category. I was thinking, I mean, not everything should be a driver optional feature. Then we kind of percolate these silos and these capabilities that make it really hard and a big matrix, right? I understand if there are some capabilities that are special, but then to take a virtual server and to plug it into X number of networks is something I believe everybody should already be able to do. But if it requires any sort of driver modification, yes, we would have to. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
because that's kind of where how we designed it. We said, initially before we do anything, we're going to ask you how many network allocations you need, and you tell us, okay, I need maybe one network allocation or two network allocations. We loop through whatever we have and we give you X times that. And that X is what we're trying to improve. We've always assumed that it's going to be two. I mean, initially it was just one tenant network. And now then with the admin network, we said it's going to be 2. And now we're saying you could have X number of tenant networks that we want to connect to.
Yeah. So at least this information is different. At least when a user will try to create a share from a share network that has 2 subnets on that AZ, I think that he expects that the driver configure both allocations on both subnets. So if any driver can't handle this, we might schedule a share to a host that might fail to do so, and this might lead to an error on share creation. So I believe that some drivers may fail with this sort of modification.
Agree.
But
So
we can think a little bit about it and go through some codes and see if this is 100% true. So at this point, that the spec that is on the review, he's considering that we have these capability on the drivers, and drivers might or might not implement creating share service with multiple tenant subnets, for example. But this is not an open point for discussion. Okay, so considering that not all drivers can support such operation, we were thinking on providing these backend capability, and by providing these, the scheduler will know on where to schedule the share correctly in order to have at the end the share created on a share server that provide the interface for as many as subnets are within that share network. So some drivers interfaces are being proposed, and the spec details some of them. Something that is also being considered is to add the API that will handle add or remove subnets from share networks that are already being used. So not just support multiple subnets. The idea is to have an interface. It's to provide through the API the ability of add or remove subnets, and this will affect all the share servers that are already deployed. So if we go back to the previous topic, this solution is kind of very related. So the same thing we are planning to do is to have the capability on a share server indicating that he is able to update this network configuration. So we can consider on a share server that's already deployed that we can associate a new subnet to it by just updating the share network. So by updating the share network with new subnets might affect and update share servers that are already deployed. So same thing for security service. We are planning just to add or remove subnets and not changing any other parameter from network from now. And this is going to be the same workflow for the security service. The share server capability will help us on the API to identify if we can update that share network to include or to remove a subnet. So the same capability will have the problems that we were talking about earlier, that we need to probably provide Manila message operations so admins can fix, can update their share servers that are already deployed to support or not, depending on the Dev implementation. And let me see, you guys have any consideration till now?
Yeah, I wanted. I mean, isn't this problem vertically sliceable, where you want to first give the ability to extend share networks itself, and deploy shares on multiple subnets before we talk about modifying existing share networks, because that brings its own set of complications. The first one is very achievable, which is and it's a logical step forward, right? Because we've discussed this multiple times over in the past PTGs as well. How do we support IPv4 and IPv6 for a given share server? We don't today. It's either you make a choice right off the bat saying this server just supports IPv4 or IPv6 given whatever share network you're configuring it with. So now we provide them an ability to configure multiple subnets where, I mean, given the use cases that you explained to us, we don't care about them just being IPv4 and IPv6. We don't mind if there are two different IPv4 subnets or or multiple IPv6 subnets if you want. But we want to make sure that the backend can actually support these network allocations and make sure that the share server is configured and then the share is actually exported on all of these different networks. So that's your primary concern, and this is the, I mean, the whole other aspect of dynamically modifying these networks seems like a whole another concern, right?
Yeah, could be two different functionalities. I'm trying to talk about both because the spec addresses both. So we might need to split if you think that's better.
I feel it is better. I don't know what is your thoughts on it, folks, because I can give you my reasoning. This is going to get a little complicated as is. It feels easy as a thing we can get in one cycle if we can get network modifications working, and then we can let driver authors know that there's this new capability where you can go make minimal modifications perhaps to your drivers, per my theory, to support multiple subnets, and then you can actually have this ability to modify share networks in use, which gives you then the ability to modify subnets and then the ability to modify security services, because the whole user experience will probably be tied in the same way for both of these.
Okay. I think that's better. You can split both into different specs and have different feedbacks on each of them, and probably have different separate implementations. Probably we're going to face these in more than one release. And okay, I don't see any problem with that. Will end up being more easy to review the spec, I think, also, and I don't see any problem with that.
And it gives you also a different perspective when you're looking at the existing first party drivers in the Git. I think when we introduced the admin networks, we modified both the container driver as well as the generic driver, the two first party DHSS2 drivers, to support that. So now you can think of, okay, now you have the aspect of scaling across tenants, so you can actually do that through to all of the first party drivers in the Git easily, because it's really as easy as saying --nick equals this and plug in X number of nicks to your Nova VM.
For sure. Okay, and so considering the first part of implementing the part of supporting creating shares with the multiple subnets, do you guys have any concern? So I'm not sure if I was able to talk every change that was proposed, but basically there are some new driver capabilities and all some new interface in order to have drivers that implement or not multiple subnets per share network. But I have here on the Etherpad, I think that was Kartaka that added this to the Etherpad regarding add export location per subnet for sure. Yeah, so the idea is to that drivers provide a list of export location, and each driver will implement on their own how they are going to export their propose how they are going to provide the list of export locations based on the multiple subnets.
So how do I know as a user whether I have support for this in my cloud? Would be another concern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, is this going to be a one of those share type extra specs? Because you're saying this is going to be a driver capability, right?
Yeah.
But will this driver capability just remain in the scheduler, or are you expecting to make some sort of a share type extra spec mapping and expose that to an end user?
It's something that we can do, right? Yeah, we can provide this info as a capability to the schedulers, so users might reach this information by getting pull information. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that this is essential because otherwise, I mean, if you don't do this, what's going to happen is I will go ahead, create a bunch of share networks and share network subnets and create my share and then expect that, that this is going to come in as an asynchronous user message saying, sorry, could not find your host because you have more networks than we can, than all the hosts can support, um, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, which is not the worst thing, but if that is, if I don't know if that's the kind of user experience that's I can live with it kind of thing, we can discuss. You might want to check with Karthika as well, because I presume even in his cloud, if he has two different kinds of storages, he's probably gonna not have things that will work for a while if things don't support this feature.
Yeah, that's true. This is a very important thing that we might consider. It's a good feedback. Thanks.
And the other aspect of scheduling that I remember from the other spec, where we proposed scaling a share network across multiple AZs, was we said there's going to be a default AZ and there's going to be a subnet in a default AZ at the max. And so it's not going to be hard for the scheduler to ever figure out where the share has to land, because every share network, if you don't specify an AZ, will end up having a default AZ because you're going to provide some sort of network information that will convert into a default AZ for us, which means it's going to be accessible across your cloud. So in this new change that you're proposing, you're going to have X number of subnets per availability zone, which means that I mean we need to be 100% sure that all of those AZs are reachable from the host that's going to get this request. Which I mean, let me rephrase that. It's not something that I'm expecting the driver to enforce or something, but I'm just saying for that to work, your backend must be able to reach all of these AZs or something, or all of the subnets in a given domain. So this is something you'll want to clarify, or
this is something that we must clarify to the admins. And this is something that they might already being notified by the documentation. I saw something about that at some point. So for sure they might need to be aware of that. But it is not something that we can handle by ourselves on Manila. There's a more configuration at the admin side.
I agree. Cool. Did you have anything else to add on that part, or do you want to move to your next part?
Not sure. No, we don't have. I don't have anything about that. This specific implementation. We are not discussing right now the update scenarios. So.
No, I mean, we can certainly. I'm sure you were prepared for that. I'm just saying we'll separate the concerns. The first one seems clear and straightforward because we have discussed this before. At least I recall the discussions when we had initial IPv6 support and stuff. So the second one is a new use case that I've not heard of before. So you should probably be diving deep into that, but as a separate concern.
Okay. So guys, I don't have anything else about this one. So I think that at least from my notes here, I covered everything that I was hoping to talk about it. So I don't know if you guys have any questions regarding these. I'm planning to work on this spec that was already proposed, so we can split both on two specs and have different comments and reviews on that, and see how it goes. So from my side, that's it.
Awesome. Yeah, that works for me. Let's go around the room.
Yeah.
Any concerns? Okay. Cool. I think I interrupted Tom, but I think he was generally agreeing as well.
Yep. Sounds like a good plan.
Yep. All right, Douglas. So we'll look forward to that spec and take any discussion onto that spec that you'll write. And I suppose this one is abandoned, the one that you called out. Or no, it's still around. But yeah, you can choose to update that spec. That's the same spec if you want. That way you can give Rodrigo credit for his work.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else about these topics? Or are we ready to take a small break before we discuss the next one?
Yep.
All right. That's great. So we'll just, how about a 7-minute break this time and catch up at, I don't know what the UTC is. I think it's 22:30 UTC, right? Or 21:30. 20. I'm going to check.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. 22:30. See you folks in at 22:30.
See you.
Okay.
All right. Welcome back, folks. Are we ready to get started again? Cool. All right. So we are going to be talking about the new TC tags that we'd like to apply. And this for me, honestly, is firstly a refresher. And I think I invited the folks from TC to join us, and Gansham did show up. I think he got dropped off for some reason. Hopefully he'll join us again. Oh, there he is. All right. So it's going to be me rambling for a couple of minutes first to try and explain what I understand, and we might need some history lessons from both Tom, Gansham, and anybody else that's actually aware of what the mission was and what our previous attempts are and have been and stuff. So let me start off with a minor intro on what I was trying to do. Uh, the Etherpad for this particular discussion is on the main Etherpad. It's linked out of there. And I started putting down some of my ideas over there for this discussion. So there's a meta doc that you folks might have seen. It's on the governance website. And it describes all of the tags that are currently available and stuff. And there are a few classifications on those tags. Per that page, there are at least 1, 2, 3, 5 classifications. And the only things that we really care about, I think we don't care about the one in the team description tag, going off by what I understand from the maintenance mode aspect. But every other thing, I had a thing or two to talk about. So that's where we'll start. The questions that I had were about the TC management, TC managed tags initially. I don't, although I have worked on Manila for long, I probably had kept my ears a little away from the ground on what the movements are with respect to this. As far as the TC managed tags go, there is a starter kit compute tag, which what I understand is the basic set of components that are required to create a to support virtualization of compute. So it says compute starter kit, and understandably, a component like Manila is an add-on service. It's not absolutely necessary for you to have a storage over a network for compute to work, compute virtualization to work. So that at least is, I think, the rationale that I understand uh, from that page. And so you will definitely see even cinders missing, right? Persistent storage by itself is not necessary, is the rationale. So the other one is TC approved release, and this applies to a broader set of projects, and you will see practically a lot of the major projects that we work with and interface with on that list. And this is a little unclear to me because I mean, I think that the definition of this has evolved as OpenStack has matured as well. So maybe I'm not sure if the current page reflects the exact definition what that's supposed to be. So that's my question one on the on the TC managed tags, but we can actually get started with the easier ones and then come back to this, because I'm sure I mean, since Kansham is here, he can give us some more context on these, uh, and we can have a good discussion. The, right below are project based assertions, and the project assertions that are in that list right now. Uh, the first one says follow standard deprecation, and we already have that tag. I don't recall when we applied for it, but I suppose this was one of the things we got grandfathered into. The other is supports API interoperability, and right now that tag only applies to Nova. And when I read the requirements and the rationale for it, I kind of feel like it actually applies to more services than Nova, and these more services we're talking about support API versioning and make sure that there is backwards compatibility, and a part of that is also about branchless API testing, where you're sure that you're always testing a API at a given version, so that you know that you're not introducing any regressions uh, for a published API at that given version. So I feel like we tick all these three boxes in terms of requirements. So that's one thing I definitely want to follow up back with you folks on. And I mean, stop me at any time if you
I
want
think
to.
that's right, Gautam, and we should just tell the TC that we think we fulfilled this and just haven't pursued the tag.
Yeah.
And is there any issue?
Agreed.
Yeah, so if I see like Manila has upgrade and stable policy tag already.
Mhm.
These are the two tag, and API interoperability is actually, I feel it should be a must tag for all the services providing API, but we are not doing good on what is API interop or what is not. So getting those kind of consensus is very difficult.
But
But yeah.
These three requirements, if there is consensus on those, I think we follow. We have a microversioning scheme. We run branchless API tests.
So on micro versioning part, like currently we have those working group guidelines. The first point, API interoperability guidelines. So as long as you guys follow, I think Manila is eligible for that.
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, I mean, obviously there could be some dialogue and answering of questions and checking, but it seems to me we do. It seems to me that even, I'll put it this way, even Monty should be happy with the interoperability across clouds and stuff, given the API.
Yeah. The only thing, like, can say these guidelines are just guidelines. The recommendation part is not, it's a must things. So there actually the things differ. Few people thinks like the interop in a different way. So I was thinking to work on these guidelines, or at least have a minimum set of guidelines as a must when we say API or interop. And the gray area where, like, for example, adding the field in response is interop or not. So it's a like a discussion point whether we wanted to define it or not, because how the people using it getting the response, not checking the length of response or something, right? But as per the current requirement, I feel like I agree with Tom. So Manila can just propose and we can verify, which is I think already there for Manila, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I can, in my proposal, call out these points that are there in the requirements specifically, because I don't recall this page, this particular interop guideline, but when we adopted micro versions from Nova, I think we took it to the letter, which was doing all of the border testing and making sure that we always leave a test behind that's always testing a micro version, an API at the micro version that it was changed. I mean, in terms of modifying tests as well, we've been completely strict about that. Uh,
Yeah,
Probably
Manila, I think Tempest plugin covers those part. Like
exactly.
if something you are trying to change from the supported stable branch, it won't allow you, right? Until
Exactly.
you explicitly modify the test on. So that verification is there, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. So this one seems easy and non-contentious. So this would mean just go ahead and follow the process to apply for this tag. And the next one on that list is supports upgrade. We have that tag. We do have an upgrade process, and then there is supports accessible upgrade. So this is the next thing that I wanted to discuss. We don't have this tag currently applied on Manila, but it feels like it's one of those things that we could do as well. The rationale and the requirements, I'll let you browse that for a second, but I can give you a TLDR version. It is that I mean, when you have resources that you have provisioned or you're managing, those resources should not be affected when you are going through an upgrade. And which is true of all the shares that we provision, share servers, share groups, snapshots, etc. We're not in the data path that puts us at a good candidate of saying, you can even throw away the control plane. And these resources are not abandoned in any way or modified in any way. They're not driven from Manila through their lifetime. They're provisioned, yes. They're modifiable, yes, but they're not subject to any changes during an upgrade.
Yeah, I would think we're at least in the position that Sender is in on that.
Right.
You can, you may break CRUD operations for a while or whatever, but the data plane the volume should remain usable, and similarly shares should remain usable. The upgrade won't break that.
So on the last requirement, like the integration testing of full stack.
Yep.
So do you have Granite job or
So
you do it in?
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So we currently have a Grenade job. It's a legacy Grenade job, which creates a bunch of resources. We don't run any data path before and after Grenade or something like that. In the sense, I'm not sure Grenade supports that, but if it is something that it supports, we can definitely do that as well. Which is we'd create a VM perhaps and mount the share and keep some operation running and check back after the cloud is upgraded.
I would like to do the same degree that other projects
The
would do
projects are
on
probably
that,
right.
though. It's not clear to me there would be a
Yeah. So
like migration of Nova during an upgrade or doing a Sender migration of data between one backend and another during upgrade, or I mean, these are all good ideas, but
yeah, that's true.
or the text volume and someone is writing to it and they're making sure there's no data loss. Manila actually should do quite well under that as long as it's hard mount. You might see a stall in a write operation, but with hard mount, at least for the NFS case, that write should eventually complete, even if it's delayed for, 30 seconds or 45 seconds in the worst, bad case. So there are things that could be tested. I'm just not 100% sure that in a dev stack infrastructure right now with limited DSVM type resources and so on, we're really set up to do that. if other projects are and we can model on that, that would be great.
Yeah,
This
that's a good point.
would-
No, yeah, it
I
makes
mean,
sense.
there are a lot of good kind of scenario tests that cannot be done terribly well with nested virtualized VMs, you know, if they're the consumers, to show that things are working well. You have problems with the tested infrastructure more than you do with the functionality of the under test.
Yeah, that's true. Like for now also, we don't do like live migration for upgrading and all. If we start doing, I think it's hard to make that job stable or possible with our infra
I'm not
resource
sure
and all.
we even have a test yet that would do a Nova attach of a sender volume and go
No,
through
so
and do
what?
through the whole
Mhm.
time. You know what I mean? As opposed to,
Mm,
I'd be surprised if there's one that says, "Oh, is it still attached? Is the attached status good and no error?" You know, not to make fun of it. That's a valid
mhm.
test, but it's not. You
Yeah.
know, we can match. I
So
think we can match what other projects do, and I just wouldn't want to commit to stuff that goes beyond what the DSVM type infrastructure and it's really going to support.
yeah, I agree with that, because starting with those minimum requirement thing, like testing, if we see Grenade just run the smoke test of Tempest to verify whether upgrade is being successful or not, with creating the few resources and checking that. And if you want to extend, I mean, that's enough for having this tag. And if you want to extend those testing, that's like the additional part, you can always do that if that's feasible. But you don't need to have like 100% upgrade scenarios testing in Granite. That's not feasible or possible in our current CI/CD infra.
Good points. I added those on the Etherpad. It's something I can follow up on. Currently, we have a Grenade job that sets up a few resources and certainly checks API compatibility, or even there when grading and stuff, by using an older client to access these resources and stuff on a newer cloud. And
Yeah,
I should also check
we
the
have a
mhm.
Zul v3 ready now, Grenade Zul v3 job.
Yeah, I was
So
planning on talking to Luigi.
yeah.
I just barely looked at it. He
Mhm.
said he can help with the Grenade
Yeah,
translations, at
is
least on our end. So,
yeah. Yeah.
so we should be able to
Yeah,
run that
there's
with Sul v3.
a lot of work on that one, I think. So we'd like to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other concerns regarding this accessible upgrade tag? Hearing none. I think the last thing that actually sparked off all of this is the vulnerability managed tag. And oh yeah, actually, before I forget, what is the status on using this project called Tobiko uh, across OpenStack as such? I mean, when you folks were talking about, the complicated upgrade scenarios, that's what I'm reminded of, because for instance, Victoria and I were talking about it the other day with the downstream Red Hat perspective as well. Is that something that you're seeing adopted by other projects as some sort of a data path test during an upgrade?
Gautam, are you asking, is it just a Red Hat thing or is it something that?
Yeah, it's pretty much, I
we have
guess.
some Red Hat enthusiasts for Tobiko, and they make a good argument for using it for doing these kind of tests, but and that may be fine. But does it have traction upstream? And Gautam, my thought there is, again, the infrastructure. is that it's probably used with much more,
Yeah.
with kind of a realistic deployment and without nested virtualization, for example, and with a lot more RAM.
Yeah. And it, okay, cool, makes sense. Yeah, but just got reminded of that, so thought
But
I'll
your
clarify.
question remains.
Yeah, because I mean, there's just as much that we could do with Grenade, thanks to all the infrastructure issues that we just talked about. So, all right. Okay, let's move on to the next tag, which is the vulnerability managed tag. And this one is important to us because we actually had user feedback. It was a public cloud that reported the vulnerability that we fixed in the last cycle, and in informal discussions with them on the bug, as well as via CoreSec emails, they expressed interest that we ought to be under the ambit of the VMT team, the vulnerability management team, and have the same security process as the rest of the OpenStack projects, because I mean, it makes triage and bug fixing and releases and all a lot more coordinated for them. So that I felt was certainly a valid concern, which made me look at these tags in the first place. Because unless we've applied for this tag, the VMT does not really own security bugs for our team. And we are in a weird situation also with a lot of core team changing and stuff, where we've lost quorum on the CoreSec team. So we created one with a subset of the core reviewers on Manila, and this subset had access to a bunch of security bugs, and they were triaging them by themselves, but and the VMT team, of course, can be added to any of these bugs. So anybody that's reporting a vulnerability seems to first add the VMT team, and the VMT team's current response is Manila is not under this VMT program. So they then add the Manila CoreSec team, and then it was open to a bunch of reviewers that are currently not working on Manila. So that's this complicated situation that we ended up in before we actually got pinged privately and such, and we fixed that. So currently, I added Douglas in the last cycle, and we have Tom and me, and the requirements for this tag seem to be that we ought to have a handful of people from the core team. So it cannot be extended to the whole core team. Because it's a core security team, as such. By definition, it's not. I mean, on first exposure, you want to actually limit the number of people that know about it, because of day zero attacks and stuff. So all that said and done, this tag actually has a large piece of literature in terms of requirements. But I feel going through these requirements that we've met a few of these in order to work with VMT and have their cooperation when we're fixing these and triaging these security bugs. So that's where we are. The 0.5 for us was the biggest deterrent on this page. It says that the projects are encouraged to undertake a review, an audit, or a security threat analysis. And we had no know-how or domain experts in that field to come help us with the security analysis of the entire project itself. But now I mean, 0.5 never was not like it is today. It initially said this threat analysis is required. So today it says this threat analysis is encouraged.
Yeah, if I could just add a note on that. And sorry to interrupt, Gautam. If I could just add a quick,
yes, please.
That I was I tried to go meet the VMT requirements. And the process was brand new. And there were some quite zealous security people from a company this, well, they're not really associated with OpenStack anymore, let's put it that way. And they were UML crazy and wanted these very, very elaborate analysis and so on. And I did a combination of my own lack of skill and naivete and the obstacles presented. I kind of ran away from it for a while. So it's really great that Gautam's coming back to it. And he's done it with a concrete, having just worked a concrete issue through with the VMT folks. So he has a lot of credibility with them. I don't think he'll encounter the kind of friction that I had at that point. Also, he's just very capable. So I'm all for this.
That's a cool joke at the end, but no, that's cool. Yeah, I guess it was the action of loosening the jar. Um, uh, if that anecdote can be used here, because when I was talking to the VMT folks, they already had a lot of context, and they were pointing me to other instances and bugs that we have interacted with them previously for. So this again should feel non-controversial. If anybody has any concerns, suggestions, please let me know. I think one of the concerns that was posed was what goes under this and what does not. The VMT does not expect that everything that the project is concerned with has been, security tested, and they're going to be responsible for security of everything. That's not what they're for. They're largely saying this is for the project software alone, not the plugins and the integrations that are there. So third-party systems, third-party storage systems, etc., will not be, if there is a security flaw in, let's say, an EMC storage backend, that's not something that this process is going to be used for. And it's not, and we should best hope that's not exactly the kind of vulnerability that gets reported only on OpenStack. If there is a storage backend issue sort of thing. Anything?
Yeah, and that's an clarification. It was not at all clear earlier that we didn't have to, for example, do a security audit for the generic driver and stuff like that, which meant basically you do it for all of OpenStack, since the Cinder and Nova and everything else, Neutron.
Exactly. Yep. Awesome. Cool. I think that brings us to the last. No. Go ahead, Kanchal.
How it's for like Cinder with backend, or I can say Keystone with some of the ends.
Well, the interesting thing is they were grandfathered, so they have never done the audit that's encouraged. In fact, if you look at the vulnerability tag ones, vulnerability managed, I believe that Sahara, well, the question would apply to Sahara, right? Unless, because I don't think they were grandfathered. And Barbican, but Barbican doesn't have, 80 backends like Cinder. Barbican applied for it. Maybe Sahara did. Maybe Trove went through it, or they got grandfathered. I don't know. This is, the answer is not many people have actually done this. If you were DEFCOR, you just got it for free.
Yeah, all these initial 5 or 6 services, they're from DEFCOR side, and Heat, and I don't see Designate, but Heat also going like as a add-on in the intro or DEFCOR.
Cool. That actually brings me back to that first concern that I kind of mentioned but washed over, which was all the way up top, this approved release thing, and it calls out a bunch of things that I didn't exactly have context for or completely, which is these are projects that the OpenStack Foundation board views as candidates for trademark use under the OpenStack Foundation trademark policy, and that includes practically all the other projects that people use. So I kind of don't have context about why Manila was not included in this, or if there was ever an attempt. And it also, I mean, gives me the same kind of this thing when the foundation folks reach out regarding interop guidelines on the mailing list, because I don't know whether I should respond and ask whether there was any attempt to adding Manila tests in there.
So I suspect, Gotham, that a lot of this had to do with, in the past, the projects would get incubate and graduate.
Yeah.
And Manila was in process and moving along that way. And I think that's when some of this badge system stuff evolved. And before we graduated, that process went away. John Shum probably knows better than I, but I think that was, back with the big tent move and, that type of thing. And if you look at this list of projects, I suspect they all went through that process or were just DEF-core in the first place. You see phrasing in here that the projects in this group should generally represent the most mature OpenStack projects. And that phrasing of maturity was the language that was used around graduation and incubation and all that.
Yeah.
I suspect we didn't make the cut. Manila is, half as old as OpenStack itself.
Great.
So even though, for instance, at the company where Gotham and I work, it's considered a core service that, in our distribution and so on, it didn't, historically wasn't.
Yeah, that's exactly the same. Like when board of directors used to check what all things to add as a trademark. So whether the projects are following the release things and all, or it's TC approved or under the eyes of TC thing. So that was one of the criteria they used to check.
I'm sorry, I'm wondering if there could be a discussion with the TC and perhaps with the board about refreshing this list. I mean, Trove is not a project, right? And
yeah, so it's a kind of superset. So if we see the interop thing, 1 or 2 years back, those ads on being started with heat and designate. Initially, trademark is with all these 5 or 6 services. So whenever you apply for the trademark programs under AdZone, so that time you can always get this TC approved release tag. But I think having now everything under TC approved release, because there is no those big tent or incubated things now. So maybe we have to refresh this, that we don't need this tag maybe, or we can update interop or board. Okay, it's not like something is not following the general process of release or TC governance, and that is still under TC. Everything under that is following everything. So I think I can bring it on TC side instead of adding, or instead of having projects not in this list. Oh, they're not following this thing. So, or instead of adding everything, let's just maybe duplicate
that
the
makes
tag.
sense. Having a list and then not being on it, that's bad. Not whether the list is there, I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, I can check. But as long as you apply for the trade-off under AdZone, You can check with interop, like if we have the guidelines and we have the test case. On test case also, I think it doesn't need to be added under Tempest. So adds on trademark program can have the test under the Tempest plugin, like heat and designate does.
And
So,
just adding a small subset of tests would do as well, or are they
so
expecting?
it depends on the capability. So it will be mapping with those capability. Like for example, for Noah, we have the create server, list server, say update server. So these capabilities are there. So the test covering those capabilities needs to be there. So first step is what all capabilities you wanted to add as an interop, and those are nothing but your standard or stable APIs. If few APIs are, say, backend specific or not, you can say stable, or you recommend like they can behave in a different way. So obviously you don't want to add those as interop guidelines. But whatever the basic things are there, so those goes under guidelines. And interop discuss with teams, like, okay, what are the things you define as a guidelines? Then they review it, they ask for test, and everything is there. Then they propose it to the board, like this is the new addition, adds-on program, and these are the guidelines ready, test case ready. So then board discuss to approve that.
That makes sense. So, I mean, but when would be the next opportunity that you guys would get to talk about this tag specifically? And is that something we can join as well, or?
So yeah, so we have tomorrow and day after tomorrow PTG for TC. Tomorrow is 4 hours, and the day after tomorrow is 2 hours. I think 13 UTC to 17 UTC tomorrow. So I'll add this topic because we might have time to discuss that. So once we add that topic, I'll add the topic, and then you guys can join and we can discuss it.
Yeah, that works for
because
us.
doing it after PTG is late. I mean, we have PTG now, so it's right time. Let's discuss it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can definitely join, and I want to hear the different perspectives that there were or something. I mean, honestly, for me, for Tom, for everybody in this room right now, the perspective is that there is. I mean, this is definitely a core service as far as we are concerned. There are enough number of users that are out there in the wild that are using it directly from upstream. There are users that are using it with all of the different distributions that are there. And it's reached a level of maturity for us personally that we kind of feel like, if there is any deterrent, we should be squashing it at this point for it to be considered any different than any other project or something. And this comes in a little more aggressively at this point, given that there are newer ideas like scaling. I mean, taking this as an isolated service into Kubernetes or OpenShift, and consuming it, consuming resources that we're able to manage for through those platforms as well. So that's like the direction that's leading us. So all of these impediments probably need to go away to encourage us to get there.
Yeah, that's true, and I really appreciate how Manila is still enthusiastic and energetic. A lot of projects having very less contributors, and people are like, okay, whatever there, okay, let's just continue that. But you guys really doing awesome job, and getting more tags and applying for trademark, I think, is a really good plan.
Awesome. Great. We're actually over 10 minutes over, and thank you so much for joining us and staying up late. It's probably way past bedtime in for most of you. So we'll stop right now, and I'll recap the discussion on the meeting list. Sorry, on the mailing list. And our next meeting is going to be at 1300 on Friday. We did advance it by an hour because we had some more topics that we wanted to discuss, and we lost yesterday. An hour this morning. So please reach out to me if you have any concerns, want to get something else added to the schedule, want to invite somebody else. But yeah, and another thing, please remember 1600 on Friday, we have our happy hour. So please do show up with beers and maybe fun costumes or whatever else that you want to come here with. And we're definitely not talking work stuff. We'll have some fun for that hour. So that said, thank you and see you all.
Yeah, thanks,
See you.
guys.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.